Hello, thank you all for joining me today at my YouTube channel, Inspirations by Classy Ken. This is episode three of Miracles in the Midst of Crises. And today I have one of my BFFs, Kim Barksdale, with me joining me today. Thank you for joining me, Kim.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. She's going to tell her testimony about what God has done for her. But what I realized on last week is that I began to speak to you about not giving up. And I began to say some things about Joseph, and I didn't finish what I was saying. So I wanted to just recap on what I was saying about Joseph. And last week, my inspiration of the day was speaking with you all about not giving up. And I was saying, don't give up because God is always in control. No matter what the situation is, He has a plan. And I spoke about Joseph, and I spoke about, Joseph had a dream, and actually it was a prophecy that God had given him in a dream. And his brothers, they were jealous, and they were jealous about what Joseph had told them that was going to occur in the dream, and they threw him in a pit. And what I was saying about not giving up is that although Joseph's brother threw him in a pit, they sold him into slavery. Joseph ended up working for the king Potiphar, and Potiphar's wife lied and said that Joseph tried to rape her. Joseph just had so many things happen to him. But as he went throughout his life, God always had favor on him. He always had favor. And at the very end, Joseph basically interpreted a dream for the king. And it was about having 7 years of famine. And 7 years where he was going to gain, it was going to be a harvest, and then 7 years of lack. It was going to be 7 years of famine. And Joseph was able to interpret the dream for the king. So at the end, Joseph was able to save the town from famine. He was able to save his family because his family came, and basically they were able to stay with Joseph, and he saved the whole community from a famine that if Joseph had not interpreted the dream, if God wouldn't have gave Joseph the interpretation of the dream, during this 7 years of plenty, they would have just maybe been wasteful. They basically would not have been storing it up. So Joseph's prophetic wisdom from the Lord helped them to store up for 7 years so that in the time of famine that they could have food. So if you look back on Joseph's life, even though we see that, what we will call a troublesome life, his brothers was jealous, they did him wrong, but at the end, God still got the glory, and God still used Joseph. And what I loved about it was that Joseph could have turned his back on his family when they came for food, when they came for help, but he didn't. He knew that it was all in God's plan. And so that's one of the reasons why I wanted to recap, to go back and say that's one of the reasons why you can't give up, because you don't know what God has in store for you. You don't know how He's going to use you. You don't know what He's going to do to use you to bring Him glory. So you can't give up. And a lot of times when you have a calling on your life or you have a promise, that's when the enemy is out to get you, because the enemy is not really worried about nobody who's not doing anything. Yeah, you might have some say, well, I'm having problems at my job, or that's just life. That's called life. I'm talking about when you have one thing after another, after another, after another. That's the enemy trying to get you to give up on the promises of God. And if you just keep on going like Joseph did, you will see God get the glory in the end. You will understand the purpose, that why you had to go through everything that you had to go through. So I wanted to touch back on that because I didn't finish it. A lot of times I get to talking and I lose my train of thought. So I definitely wanted to go back and explain to people who maybe not know about Joseph's story, but that was the important thing about not giving up. And also to continue why we shouldn't give up is Kim's testimony. And I wore this shirt specifically for her. It says, God never fails. God never fails. This is a part of my inspirational t-shirt line. Last week I had hashtag prayer warrior. I do have a few available in sizes small to extra large, I think it is. So if you guys are interested, hit me up in the comments. Let me know. I do ship, or you can come to the salon and pick them up. So I'm going to turn the floor over to Kim so she can share her testimony with what God has done for her.
So first, let me start off by saying I had been through just different stages of discouragements, from things happening in personal life. So I had thought that I was probably stressed out about some stuff, but not to a degree to where I thought I needed any type of medication. So I had been experiencing blackouts. Didn't know when it was coming on. It just happened. And then I just happened to wake up and realize I had passed out. So it happened a few times in 2019. And a couple times went to the emergency. They did stress tests, EKGs, was basically trying to diagnose me as just having stress and wanting to put me on some type of anxiety medication, which me being stubborn was like, no, I done been in stress before, things have happened before, and I was not about to be put on any type of medication for anxiety or stress related. So this particular time, I was out with my kids for my birthday, and we were eating, and I passed out. I did not want to go to emergency this day, but a friend that was happening to be at the same place where I was insisted that I go. So she actually drove my daughter's car to the emergency room, and they end up having me go to another emergency room to get diagnosed. Well, this particular time, this doctor, instead of running EKGs, he insisted that I have a CT scan. And the CT scan came back that I had over a 6-inch tumor on my right frontal lobe, or left frontal lobe, sorry. And he advised me that when he came back in and told me I had the tumor, that I could not leave the hospital and I needed to have surgery done right away. So I was in disbelief when you thinking you coming in for something else, and they come and tell you, you have this tumor that needs to be operated on right away. My first thought was, please don't let it be cancerous. So he ran tests. It came back that it was not cancerous, but because it was so large and it was pressing against my brain, he wanted to do surgery right away. So within, I think, 2 to 3 days, I ended up having surgery. And I was in the hospital probably, I think the first time I was in the hospital for like 8 or 9 days. It wasn't healing correctly. I had started having bleeding issues. They were working on stopping it. Sent me home. Within 2 weeks, he was actually following up with me while I was at home, but within 2 weeks, they end up, I had to go back to emergency because the sutures were not healing, and blood was coming out of the actual sutures. So I get to the emergency room the second time, 2 weeks later, and the doctor tells me that I'm not healing correctly, and they have to go into my brain again and do a second surgery to stop the bleeding. So I'm like, God, this is not happening again. But I needed them to fix what the issue was. So that happened 2 weeks later. I originally went in on February the 27th of 19. March the 11th was my second surgery. And I was in the hospital this time for probably I think six days. So in the midst of all of that happening, my biggest fear was not coming out of surgery. The second fear was not being able to be the person I was before.
Exactly.
So I didn't know whether doing them, because of them having to go into my brain, I didn't know whether I was going to have memory. I didn't know whether I was going to walk and and function like I did before. So um, after getting out of the hospital, I still was having issues with the side healing. And
now, what were those issues? Just like
the issues were where it was not, blood was not dissolving like it was supposed to.
okay,
So it was
so
more
it wasn't
like
like clotting. It was still
like a
just
hemorrhage,
like,
and
okay,
then because it was hemorrhaging, it was draining,
okay,
and that was the issue.
okay.
So I ended up going to emergency for a third time, and the doctor was like, we may have to do surgery again.
So this is the third time.
So this was the third time, and this time I just had been praying, and I had just been asking God to heal me, from this situation.
Mm-hmm.
So me being stubborn, I told my
I'm glad
surgeon.
she's saying that, but go ahead.
I told my surgeon he was gonna have to send me home on some antibiotics.
Wow.
I was not gonna have him operate on me again.
I didn't know that.
And he looked at me like I was crazy. And we had developed a rapport, and he was the best, one of the best surgeons. I mean, I don't want to go through this again, but as far as bedside manners, he was one of the best surgeons I've ever came across. And because I've worked with doctors before during my professional duties. So he looked at me and he was like, Kim, he was like, I don't want to have to operate on you again, but it's possible I may have to. And I said, well, he told me he was going to go and talk to his other surgeons, and he was going to come back. And I let him know. I said, well, when you come back, I'm just telling you, I'm not going to have you operate on me. I made it through 2 times, and I don't want to do it again.
So was it just that you thought you were scared that you may not come out?
Yes.
Or, okay.
That was my biggest fear. Like, God got me through
right.
these 2.
Right. But can he do it
but
again?
Can he do it again?
Right.
So I was just adamant, like, well, you just gonna have to send me home on some antibiotics and see if this heal up. And so when he came back, he was like, we talked to the surgeons. For right now, we're gonna send you home on antibiotics.
Okay.
And see if this drainage stops. But if it don't, he was like, I'm gonna be contacting you, and you're gonna contact my office. I had his personal cell number.
Wow.
And he was like, you call me if anything happens.
Now that's the blessing, because as we know, doctors today,
Exactly.
and I'm not trying to shade them, I'm not, but we know they in and out. We know they don't really have that much bedside manner, and we know you definitely ain't about to have a personal cell number. So that had to be God, working. That was God working all of that out to even connect you to him.
Absolutely. So he sent me home, and I was like, okay, this is it. And he was like, all right. He was like, but if anything happens, you make sure you contact me. And I said, okay. So I went home, praying that this was going to heal. I went home. Well, actually, in the hospital, them 2 times I was in the hospital, I had physical therapy, occupational therapy. And they also said when I came home, they were going to send me home on, I had medication, and not anxiety. I had seizure medicine that I had to take because they wanted to make sure that I wasn't passing out still from what the symptoms were before. I also went home on Percocets, another kind of strong medication that's a habit forming medication. So I wasn't particularly, I'm not a person that really take medicine.
Yeah, I know.
So I did not want to take it, but I had to.
Because were you like experiencing really bad headaches, or
I wasn't experiencing any headaches.
Oh, thank God.
I was just passing out.
Oh, so you were still passing out
prior to the surgery.
Okay,
so they still wanted to make sure that I was on the medication for a little period of time.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right. Before they took me off. Okay. So came home. I had I had physical therapy, home physical therapy. I had home occupational therapy. When I got home, during this time that I was in the hospital, I was already not a big person, but I had dropped down to 104 pounds, and you can tell. And so I was not as strong as I normally was. So they had to work with me with my strengthening, walking, because I'm a fast walker. Everything
Yeah,
I
you
do
are,
is
yeah.
fast. So I had to regain that strength as well. But just to narrow things down, the therapist, I probably had my physical therapy and occupational therapist come out maybe a total of 8, 9 visits, which they thought it was going to be longer.
Mm-hmm.
And one time when they came out, the therapists were like, show me this, show me that. Oh, you seem to be gaining process quicker than we thought.
Mm-hmm.
And the couple of things that they were having me do, the therapist was like, you doing it better than I am.
Wow.
So they discharged me. Within 30 days, I was off all of my medication. And I was ready to go back to work. But my doctor was like, you have to be off at least 6 months, before I want to send you back to work. So during that time, I was just trying to regain my strength. Still praying that God speed things up, because I wasn't used to not being able to do what I normally do.
Right. And now you're out for 6 months, and you're, I could see why he was saying that, because he didn't want you like driving, trying to be cognitive as far, just with all the worry. So now you're basically having to sit, which you're not used to, and deal with that. And then what else was going on like at that time?
So what actually was going on is that prior to that, I had been displaced from work. I had been displaced from my home. I had lost my car. And I had to live with a relative after I got out of the hospital. So on top of all of this, I didn't have my own place to come to. I had lost everything, everything I had in storage, because of, I don't know, at the time where my memory wasn't really where it was. As far as my bills, I just didn't have a recollection. It's like I was nonchalant about my bills, which I normally not.
Yeah.
But because of everything that was going on, I just lost track. It's a monthly bill. I wasn't even thinking about a monthly bill. So by the time I got out the hospital, they had sold everything that I had in my home from storage.
Which was pictures of your children. I mean, I remember you calling me saying like, Dad, I think they lost it. I remember calling up there for you. Lord forgive me, lied and said I was her sister because she didn't have anyone else to do it. And the lady said, Dad, if she would have only knew what you were going through, like she didn't have anybody to advocate for her, because she said she would have tried to hold on to that, but she didn't know. And so, if we have stuff in storage and you don't show up, they just sell it. And so she lost those sentimental things. Like I can't even imagine not having like my baby's pictures and things that they made from school, Mother's Day, all of that kind of stuff. So then that's taken an emotional toll on you as well.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, everything that you can possibly have in the house, I lost, down to spoons and forks, down to everything. Everything I had was in storage. The only thing I really had some of, not all of, was like my clothes I was wearing at that time. But coats, shoes, I lost a lot. So basically, I had to start over from scratch. And me being off work, I did not get Social Security. I was just living off of a few $1,000s that I had saved from working previously. And that's what I lived off of. And thank God that where I was staying at, I wasn't being charged rent. But all my personal stuff I was responsible for. So me being off work and not knowing how, even if I got ready to move, how I was going to make this happen, was just another burden, on top of everything. And I'm still trying to heal.
Right.
In the meantime, I also had to have my son go stay somewhere else. So I'm dealing with still healing. I'm dealing with the separation of my son. I'm dealing with no job. I'm dealing with not having a car, depending on people to take me
Yeah, back
hearing
and forth.
from
Yeah, doctor's appointments.
doctor's appointments,
anywhere you needed to go.
anywhere I needed to go.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to be a burden on people, which I felt I was.
Yeah, because I don't want to interrupt you, but you know how people, they good for a minute, oh yeah, I need you here, but after a couple times, they looking at you like, and so we have to remember, like, in times when people need things, like, go the extra mile, go the extra mile. I just remember praying for Kim diligently at that time, just trying to make sure that I was encouraging her and just to hold on, because I don't care how saved you are, I don't care what title you have, that's hard. And you feel like God has forsaken me. You feel like, what did I do in my past? Did I do something in my past to bring this on me? These people that's supposed to be my friends and my family, where are they? Don't they know that I need them? Can't they see that I'm suffering? And it's just like, some people just like, they do one or two things and then they feel like they've helped you because they've done one or two things, but you need somebody to be there with you for the whole completion until God began to rebuild you back up. So dealing with that as you're trying to heal, I mean, that had to be a lot.
Mm-hmm. It was.
Yeah.
So what I can say is that it was nothing but God to get me to where I got to, because people don't know the lonely nights, the nights I cried, the nights where I couldn't sleep because I didn't feel like I was going to wake up the next day because of all of this that was going on, scared to go to sleep, thinking something else was going to happen with my brain. So those was some struggles. And on top of all that, again, just being separated from my son, I had a daughter that was in college. My other daughter was out on her own, grown with her family. So it was just a lot when I feel like, when I'm really close to my children, it was a lot. So in spite of all that, I was trying to figure out how, when I got ready to get back to work, how I was going to get back on my feet, because where I was staying at was supposed to just be temporary. And I was happened to be sitting at home one day, and I got something in the mail, which I had never thought of before. I don't know why I didn't think of it, but where I worked at before, when I left, I had a pension that I hadn't even thought about.
And you had worked there for how long?
I worked there for 10 years.
Okay.
So when I left, I had a pension, which I didn't even think about. And they happened to send me something in the mail to tell me that, hey, you got these amount of dollars that we're either you can roll it over to like I think like a IRA, or we can give you a cash option. So you know what I chose? I chose the cash option.
Yes.
And even though it was taken from my pension, I was like, well, at this time, I need this cash
exactly, because I don't have I don't have anything. Right. So it was right on time.
Right on time.
Yes.
So I still was kind of leery when I submitted it. I made copies, making sure, that I had my proof, and when they finally sent me a letter saying, we received your information, be looking out for your check.
Wow.
When the check came, I was able to not buy a whole 3-bedroom home again. I was able to buy my necessities, bedroom furniture, living room furniture, dining room furniture, a few clothes. On top of that, I was able to pay cash for a car.
Yes, glory to
so
God.
I don't have a car note.
Yes.
I was able to move into a new apartment.
Yes.
Even though my credit had teetered.
But God, yeah.
But I was able to get a nice apartment.
Yes.
And it's been uphill since then. Yes. I was able to, I've had 2 jobs since the surgery. I really wanted to get back to the hospital, which this last job that I just got on in December, nothing but a blessing. Yes. When I went for this interview, it was a connection that I had with the lady and she had with me. I didn't know this lady, but she had asked me about my personal life. She was like, just step aside from just business. What do you do? What have you been doing? Because she wanted to know why all this time I hadn't been working.
Right.
And I advised her what had happened. And this lady looked at me and she told me that, you are a blessing. She said, you're a testimony. And she asked me what had happened. And I didn't want to go into detail because I was trying not to cry about it.
Right.
And
at a
still
job
be
interview.
professional.
Right.
And so she just listened to what I said and she just was in awe because she was like, if you hadn't have told me, I wouldn't even known that you had went through
by
it.
looking at you.
By looking at me. I know because of everything I went through, and I still have scars that I know of that people may not pay attention to.
Exactly.
But just her compassion.
Right.
And when I was sitting there, I just knew I was going to get this job. I didn't even have a doubt. And she ended up calling me maybe within a week, and everything just went like clockwork. She got me, I got the job, I came in for my orientation, I passed all my drug tests, and this job actually is so ironic that because I went through physical therapy, occupational therapy, I'm working in a clinic for physical therapy.
I didn't know that.
Occupational therapy, speech therapy.
So you can
it's
connect
nothing but God.
with it.
I connect with the clients that I have to call on.
Exactly.
It's a connection. It's a sympathy and a compassion, an extra compassion that I have because of my experience.
And with the lady, when after she hired you, she left.
She ended up leaving.
Yeah, so it was like a divine appointment because God kept her there for you to come in.
For me to come in.
Yes, and
she
then
retired.
She
2
retired.
months later.
Yeah, 2 months later.
Yeah. So she all before she left, she said she wanted to still have a connection with me. I visited her church a couple of times, but she's called in, still to check and see how things are going.
Yeah.
So it was nothing but a blessing.
Yeah. Yes, and that's what God, He will connect you. That's what we call a divine appointment. He will connect you with people, and I don't know if that was her initial retirement date or whatever, but God kept her there for you to get in, and because He knew that she was going to have compassion for you. And then when you were also talking, I just want to say that's why we have to be kind to people. Because although you said like you don't, see the physical scars, if I look at you, I wouldn't be able to tell. I know you, you know what I'm saying? So I know what you've been through, but you don't know what people go through. So when you're out, and I understand everybody have a bad day, but just be kind to people because you don't know what they're going through on the inside. You don't know what their breaking point is. You don't know if, somebody could be saying, if one more thing happened, this is just it for me. We don't know the state that people are in, even though they're smiling. Because we met a couple times, I knew what you were going through, but you still dressed cute, your hair was done, you were smiling, but I knew what she was going through because I know her. But, people walk around all day and they still smiling, they still acting normal because a lot of times we have to put on a facade. It's just life. We can't just break down. So we have to pull our bootstraps up and we have to go out into the world. But internally, we're hurting, we're breaking, we're on the edge. And so that's why it's so important to be kind to one another and just not always, if somebody snap at you, just automatically pop off because you don't know why they snapping. Because they could be in pain or anything could be going on. So be kind to people. Just be kind to people. But that is just absolutely amazing. I did not know that you were working at the occupation. I knew you were, back at the doctor's office, but I didn't know it was occupational therapy.
Yep, physical therapy, speech therapy. And I love it.
Yes.
So, to end, with the story, I just know it has been nothing but God that has got me through. People that were supposed to be there, they walked away. But those that are supposed to be there are still there for me. And I'm praying that I'm there for them as well in their time of need. But all I can say is that I know without a shadow of a doubt that it was nothing but God that has got me through.
Yes.
No, I'm not a perfect angel. I don't do everything right, but I know if I had to fight somebody to let them know that I know
Right.
God brought me through, it's going to be a fight.
Yeah.
That I know.
Yes.
So I appreciate, you taking the time to let me be able to get this, out for people, that
Yes.
just think that everything is over with.
Right.
It's not over until God says it's over.
Exactly. And I'm so glad that she said that. Thank you so much for sharing, because I just remember, do you remember me telling you, like, God gonna restore everything back to you? I mean, every time I pray for her, the Spirit would tell me to tell her, I'm gonna restore everything that the enemy stole from her. And I believed it. Did you believe it, or was you just like, which I know some days you probably didn't believe it. Right. Which is,
To a degree, I believed it, but you still have that little bit of,
right. Doubt.
Doubt.
Yeah.
Like, how's it going to happen?
Yeah.
When is it going to happen?
Right.
Everything.
Right.
And.
Right. And he did. And he did.
Absolutely.
Because God never fails. He never fails to take care of his children. And that's why we just have to hold on. And I know Kim. I love Kim. Kim likes nice things. And she has, what year is that? What year is your car?
I have a 2016.
And it looked like a 2020. It's brand new. Her apartment is beautiful. I mean, her furniture, like she said, she didn't have to go put nothing on layaway. She didn't have to get one piece here, one piece there. God held that check up for her. That's why we have to be careful and we have to be diligent, because God put her at that place and held that money up for her for such a time as this. God knew that was going to happen. He knew she wasn't going to have nothing. He knew she wasn't going to be able to rely on nobody. And he held that up right in the nick of time. That's why people say he may not come when you want him, but he's always right on time. He's always right on time. Absolutely. And so it's on time, because it's not what we wanted, because it's not time, but it's on time. So I just want you to be encouraged today. Thank you so much for sharing it. It's going to help somebody. I'm so glad she did it, because she's a personal person. And I'm so glad that she opened up and shared it, because I know for a fact that this is going to help somebody that might be at their breaking point. They might be going through a divorce. They might be in a situation living with somebody, and the person that told them they got to leave in 2 weeks. They might have just lost their job and they don't know where they're going. Just hold on, because God is going to show up. He's going to show up. Just hold on. Just be encouraged. Just know by her testimony that if he did it for her, he could do it for you. He's no respecter of person. God is a God. He's faithful and he loves us. So I just want to thank you so much for joining me. If you like what you heard today,